Hey guys, Sean here and welcome to the F1 Word. Now we've still got a little bit of a way to go before the 2023 F1 season gets underway, although pre-season isn't all that far away now, very exciting. So I thought I'd sit down and go through the penalty point situation, including why each driver picked up their points and when the first ones are set to expire. You know, just so we know where everyone stands going into the new season. Before I get there though, how about a little bit of background? What are penalty points and why do we have them? Well, the idea first began to form following the crash caused by Romain Grosjean's driving at the 2012 Belgian Grand Prix, driving which actually resulted in the Frenchman getting a race ban. After much discussion, the penalty point system was eventually introduced in 2014 and points are given to drivers who do anything that the FIA stewards deem to be dangerous. At least that's supposed to be the idea of them, more on that later. For example, drivers can receive points if they are considered to blame for a collision with another competitor or for ignoring yellow flags. They are, of course, just two examples and there are many more which we'll get to when we run through the drivers. Any penalty points picked up will stay on a driver's super license for 12 months and will be wiped once that period of time has elapsed. However, drivers are allowed a maximum of 12 points on their license at any one time, and so if they hit or exceed that number, they will receive a one-race ban as a result. Now, we've yet to see that actually happen since the rule was introduced, although some drivers have come pretty close, with Romain Grosjean a couple of points away from a ban in 2018, and heading into this season, there is one driver on the grid who will be a tad nervous early on. But enough of all of that, let's run through who has what and why, and because you know I like to build a little bit of tension even though things aren't even tense, I'm going to go in reverse order, so least to most. So there are 7 drivers on the grid with 0 penalty points to their name heading into the new season, including all 3 rookies, so that's Oscar Piastri, Nick De Vries and Logan Sargent. They are joined by the returning Nico Hülkenberg as well as Carlos Sainz, Lewis Hamilton and Valtteri Bottas, whose remaining point picked up for ignoring yellow flags in Qatar back in 2021 expired in November last year. That therefore means every other driver on the grid has at least 1 penalty point to their name. Charles Leclerc is the only driver with a single point, and that was handed out after he left the track at the final chicane in Japan last year and was deemed to have gained an advantage. I'm sure you remember it well. And that point will remain on his license until October 9th of this year. Both the Red Bull drivers have 2 points each, with Max Verstappen's 2 set to expire on November 13th, 2023, of course picked up following his collision with Lewis Hamilton in Brazil. And Sergio Perez will lose the 2 points he was given for failing to stay within 10 car lengths of the safety car in Singapore last season in October. Kevin Magnussen and Lando Norris have 3 points each, K-Mag getting his for a collision with Lance Stroll in Miami and for overtaking off-track in Italy. And Norris's were given for exceeding track limits in Austria last year and for his collision with Leclerc in Brazil. George Russell has a total of 4 points on his super license. He received 2 of those for his collision with Perez in Austria, and the other 2 were also for a collision, this time with Carlos Sainz at Turn 1 in Austin. And the first couple of those points will be wiped on July 10th this year. Russell is joined on 4 points by both Zhou Guanyu and Yuki Tsunoda, Zhou getting his points for leaving the track and gaining a lasting advantage while overtaking Alex Albon at Turn 1 in Jeddah, exceeding track limits multiple times in Austria and causing a collision with Mick Schumacher in France. Yuki's were handed out for sending teammate Pierre Gasly into a spin at Silverstone and for failing to slow for yellow flags during practice at Monza. Esteban Ocon is next on the list with 5 points, the first 2 of those expiring on March 20th. He was handed those, by the way, for causing a collision with Mick Schumacher in Bahrain, and he was slapped with the remaining points for a collision with Lewis Hamilton in Monaco and for hitting Yuki Tsunoda into a spin in France. Fernando Alonso has a total of 6 penalty points on his license, 2 for colliding with Gasly in Miami last year and 1 for leaving the track and gaining an advantage at the same race. All 3 of those points will therefore be removed on May 8th, 2023. He received a point for weaving while defending in Canada last season and 2 for causing a collision with then teammate Ocon in the Brazil sprint in 2022. Alex Albon is next up with 7 points. The first 2 of those will expire on March 26th. They were given for his collision with Lance Stroll at Jeddah last year, and the remaining 5 were handed out last season for exceeding track limits in Spain, leaving the track and gaining a lasting advantage in Monaco, forcing Norris off track in Austria, as well as leaving the track and keeping a position in Austin. Lance Stroll takes the runners-up spot in the standings nobody wants to top with 8 penalty points to his name. He got 2 given for him for a collision with Nicholas Latifi in Australia last season, another for weaving while defending again in Australia, 2 points for causing a collision with Alonso at Cota, and 3 whole points for that dangerous move to try and block Sebastian Vettel in Brazil. And just so you know, the first 2 of his 8 points are set to expire on April 9th with another one coming off the following day. That means it is Pierre Gasly who tops the table with a hefty 10 points on his licence, just 2 away from a ban. And rather concerningly for Pierre, he won't have any points wiped from his licence until after the race at Imola. That's 6 races, 7 if something replaces China or it gets reinstated, to try and avoid picking up any more points. He's got to be very careful. I'll quickly run through why he was given the points. 2 came after a collision with Stroll in Spain last year. 2 were handed out for causing a collision with Sebastian Vettel in Austria. He was given 1 for exceeding track limits that same weekend in Austria, 2 for speeding under red flag conditions in Japan, 2 more for falling more than 10 car lengths behind the car in front during the safety car period in Austin, and 1 more for forcing Lance Stroll off track and gaining an advantage in Mexico. There we go then, that's who has what and why, and as I said earlier, Pierre Gasly will be very nervous heading into the new season because he's so close to a ban at the moment, and he's got to get through a fair few races without picking up any more penalty points. Lance Stroll, yeah, he also needs to be careful early on this coming season as he's got to get through 3 races without being handed 4 or more points on his licence, although I'm fairly sure he won't be quite as nervy as Gasly. That is, all assuming, of course, that the rules don't change before we get to the new season or that the FIA actually stick to it and hand out any potential race ban. And this has led, hasn't it, to some talk of perhaps scrapping the system as some deem it to be unfair. But curiously enough, whilst I'm sure it's been debated many times and some may feel that some of the points handed out seem harsh, it's not something that ever really hits the headlines until a driver comes close to the magic 12-point mark. It's almost like there's some vested interest there. Gasly is on 10 and wants it changing, and when Grosjean hit 10 in 2018, guess what? He wanted it changing. It's funny that. In fairness, though, it's not specifically those 2 drivers and those 2 situations. After all, George Russell has recently said that he thinks the system needs a rethink and says conversations have been had with the FIA. So watch this space on that one. My point is, though, the noise is louder from those close to the limit, which I suppose is the same for anything, really. Those on the brink of punishment will generally be the ones screaming loudest for change. But anyway, for me, the system largely works, but I do believe penalty points should only be handed out for dangerous driving. For example, wiping out another driver should result in penalty points. Speeding in the pit lane is also dangerous. That's why we have a speed limit, so that should result in a point or 2 as well. However, running wide and exceeding track limits 4 times in a race, is that really dangerous so long as the driver rejoins safely? I don't think so. In that situation, I think a 5-second time penalty, which is what they get, seems more than enough for that offence. Otherwise, it's up to the drivers to make sure they stay within the rules, and if they don't, then they know the system is there and they have to face the consequences for any of their errors. Then again, I suppose you could make that argument anyway with the rules around penalty points as they are. And just for the record, especially with Gasly being so close to the limit, my gut feeling is that even if he were to hit the 12 points, I'm not totally convinced the FIA would follow through with a race ban. The reason I say that is that I can see there being a level of discretion involved. I mean, is Gasly a dirty driver? No. And that's not coming from me. That's coming from some of his fellow drivers in interviews. Had he been smashing into everyone every weekend, I'd maybe feel differently, and probably so would they. But I think, and I suppose more hope, the governing body would look at the reasons behind each and every one of his points and determine if he deserves a ban from there. In which case, frankly, he shouldn't really get one. Having said that, my look through the rules before making this video didn't bring up any provisions within the regulations for exceptions or discretion, so perhaps that's not something that's possible. If I have, though, missed anything in the regulations, please do let me know in the comment section down below. As I say, though, whilst I've not seen anything that would allow for it, I'd like to think some common sense would be used. Then again, common sense sometimes doesn't feel like it applies when it comes to the FIA, does it? But again, the penalty points, for me at least, should only be for dangerous driving, not just running wide 4 times in a race. Of course, though, they are just my thoughts, but please do let me know what you think of the current penalty point system down in the comments. Would you keep it as it is? Maybe you think it should be harsher. Would you make some changes to it or scrap the whole system altogether? Let me know. And actually, on the subject of the comment section, and super quickly before I go, I am going to pin a comment asking for some feedback on what content you would like to see this coming season. Now, obviously, things like previews and the live race reaction streams will remain for 2023, and I am planning on bringing back the This Week in F1 series full-time this year, and probably Garage Gossip as well. I'm also planning to do more around race weekends and start making some more opinionated stuff, if you like, things like I used to do. So, the curious case of Nico Hülkenberg, for example, or the 2 sides of Sebastian Vettel, that sort of thing. But is there anything else you would like to see on top of that? Now, I won't be able to do everything that's suggested, but I'd love to take your your ideas on board. After all, you are the ones tuning in, so I need to make content that you guys are more likely to want to watch. Ultimately, though, I really want to step things up this season, and by step things up, I mean do more than just previews and reactions, which was basically all I did last year. Let's get things back to how they used to be on the channel. And I didn't mean for that to turn into a mini channel update, but here we are. You know what I'm like when I start waffling. That is it for this video then, but I will be back soon with some more content as always. In the meantime though, if you did enjoy this one, then please do leave a like, as it really does help the channel out, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future videos or streams. Lots to come this year. I cannot wait for the new season. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean, this has been the F1 Word, and until next time, goodbye.